Are apparently online, and away we go. Welcome to Evolution Hour on our happy-go-lucky last day of September 2024. The exciting world of analog devices and our website where we have a whole bunch of stuff that you can download for free and share around and make life annoying for people who don't like to hear about creationism and evolution. Anyway, here we are. As you can see, we are now back in the den, back from our happy birthday times. I'm now officially 72 years old, and boy, I suppose I look it. Anyway, we are finishing off not the whole book. Oh, no. Just the chapter on our little Ankylosaurs. It's the last snippet before we launch next week into the Hadrosaurs and that crowd, which means we'll be going through a breakdown of what they're including and what they're not. And then the week after that, we should be ready to launch into the source details. Hello, Brian. There we go. Anyway, and this is also one of our Casey Luskin weeks. So we get to have a pile up of material exploring some of the little nooks and crannies of the biological systems that Luskin's list keeps dumping on us. And do they really pay attention to the content of this stuff? I don't know. But because a big chunk of it's open access, you're going to be able to pay attention to it. And you won't have to take my word for it, and certainly not the Discovery Institute's. Anyway, so the last minute taxa that we get, there's the Nodosaurid Edmontonia, which is a great big blocky thing, but of course no tail club because it's a Nodosaurid. No citations at all from Sarfati and Tay. And then there's the possibly piscivorous turtle-like little tiny Liangosaurus, apparently small, only about a foot long, and it may have been juvenile. They kind of bring some of this stuff up in the material in there. The Chinese paper that they cite isn't open access, but I'll be putting up a summary of the basic content. And even Sarfati and Tay acknowledge that this particular text said, quote, a mixture of Nodosaurid and Ankylosaurid traits, unquote. Well, remember, those are two separate kinds in their own nomenclature. So they've got a critter that apparently is a little like this and a little like that. And if you recall from the previous weeks, we've been exploring the various taxa that aren't getting discussed in Sarfati and Tay's framework that are blurring the lines at the base end of what exactly qualifies as a Nodosaurid and what exactly qualifies as an Ankylosaurid. And beyond that, how do these fit up into Scelidosaurids and all the other little critters that Sarfati and Tay never bothered to include in their list. So the last little taxon is a funky little critter, Zool, Z-U-U-L, which is, of course, an allusion to the monster in Ghostbusters, the original Ghostbusters film, and I guess it's in the newer one too, maybe, who knows, the minions of Joser, that looks kind of like this particular one. And that one is open access, Arbor 2017. And naturally, I thought they would be bringing it up because there's soft tissue preservation. Paul Polagiosi, when you give attention to its due, you stop being YEC. Yes, and I will do a shameless plug. Paul Gia is one of the patrons for the channel, so that could be an indication. And as dear Brian and others, I'll be putting the little blurb up for all of our little network of people in my little narrow community on here. And I was able to introduce somebody in our science network on Twitter that includes Dan Stern Cardinale and all that to Mahler's 10th Symphony, which I found out there's a heck of a lot of classical music that have full performances that are available online. It's really quite a fabulous resource for people who don't want to necessarily go and pay for streaming services or all the other little things. And so I can often do it for my research. I had to, for one of the future Paralogs novel, I had to kind of find out what some of Max Reger's choral music sounding like, because it's going to figure as a little peripheral little nuance in a novel 8 or 9 novels down the road. Anyway, we'll worry about that later. Anyway, back to the plot at hand. So this Arbor paper from 2017 on Zool is bumping into systematics again, which, of course, Sarfati and Tay aren't even bothering about sorting out the critters within the supposed theoretical kind. But you'll be able to take a look at all of that and see yet more taxa that were out there. And nobody but an idiot would be thinking that the taxa that we have available in these various systematic papers are everything that was alive during the Mesozoic. But we know at least they were alive during the Mesozoic. And some of them will be fragmentary. They may be only known from partial skeletons or little bits and pieces of things. But nevertheless, they would need to be correlated in some kind of coherent framework within that vague baraminology. And the other shoe drop, how do they fit into the pre-flood world? What is the paleo environment of where they are living? We're just not getting that part. Oh, if I still lived in Ohio, you probably could afford to kick in, but Florida is ridiculously expensive. Oh, exactly. Everybody, this is, well, none of us are in the $100,000 Trump watch range for being able to throw money around to no purpose. If anyone is familiar with that, the latest scam from the convicted one, it's one, highly likely these things are ridiculously overpriced, and probably the pieces are obtained from China, or China, as Mr. Trump would tend to say. And secondly, particularly the $100,000 ones are interesting because they're kind of like an open-ended opportunity both for Trump to grift and to get maybe illegal contributions from people, because you can buy the $100,000 watch. And is that a campaign contribution? And how much of the cuts go into Trump? And by the way, apparently it's structured in such a way, and the little company that's the little LLE that's running the thing is operating out of like a little warehouse thing up in the wilds of Wyoming or somewhere where they have very loose laws on who gets registered in there. It's a very dicey thing that Midas Touch and various other people have been covering all the fun stuff about it. But it indicates that Trump, every time one of these expensive watches gets resold, he gets a cut. So this is the same procedure that he's done with a lot of his real estate deals and branding, where even if the apartment complex sinks like the Titanic, the condos, he gets a cut no matter what. So, he's learned how to market himself quite nicely. Yes, exactly. Switch watch makers look like it was about 100. So this and there's no guarantee about what's actually going to be delivered, because the things literally have caveats in there saying that this product is not necessarily anything like what we're showing you the picture of. So, it's weird. And what presidential candidate would be doing that? And the last thing before becoming president, whereas Trump is always bragging up about how, I'm foregoing all of my business things to be able to be of service to the people. Bullshit. Anyway, well, enough on the convicted one. Those papers will finish off the material on the Ankylosaurs, and there's material in relation to where they live and their paleo environment that we discussed or related papers that we've been dealing with in the last few weeks, because they're intriguing as to why they're in certain spots and not in others. Just as the ceratopsids are predominantly a North American phenomenon and the west side of the thing, because there's a big seaway at the time that was preventing them from expanding. So I don't know of any that's on the other side of the seaway on what eventually becomes eastern United States. So that biogeographical element is worked out in considerable detail, and is an area where, if creationism and the paleo worlds that they fantasize occurring in the pre-flood environment, your Todd Woods and others, and Sanfords, or not Sanfords, but Snelling, Ord, Clary. These are all people slogging around the geology end of stuff. Why aren't they delivering technical papers in their technical journals, the Journal of Creation and Answers Research Journal and the Creation Science Quarterly and all that? Creation Research Quarterly, Great Creation Research Society Quarterly. Why aren't we getting papers at the level that you see in the technical literature of the regular paleo environment stuff and paleogeography and systematics that we find in the regular evolutionary literature? Spoiler alert, it's because they don't have a model and they can't, because it's what they're dealing with isn't true. So they're never going to be able to shuffle around the pieces in such a way as to make it work out. Yes, they don't want to have to debunk themselves, although you do get infighting. A thing that it's kind of funky because I'm plowing through masses of CMI backposts for Rocks for Their Volume 2. And a thing that's kind of interesting is CMI, because of their divorce from Answers in Genesis, whenever they show pictures of the ark, it may be the little box-shaped ark, it may be the one that the Dutch guy made a decade ago that wasn't really seaworthy, etc., half-scale model and all that. We're going to be alluding to all that in Volume 2 of Rocks, by the way. But they avoid ever showing the Ark Encounter ark. And it's because they don't want to give any free publicity to their divorced rivals over in Hamland. So in and out, up and down, and so forth and so on. Anyway, on to the happy world of Luskin. So next week, again, we'll be starting off with the Hadrosaurs and that bunch. Those are... I'm assuming they're going to have a little bit on it. I haven't looked closely enough yet to find out, but I suppose they'll be starting off a little bit on iguanodons and that bunch, and then hadrosaurs full out. But we'll be interested to see what all they leave out. So part 2, Luskin's 800 papers. What I do with I have the spot where I'm leaving off in their list, and then as topics come up, sometimes I'll be looking at the authors involved to see if any more of their works, once I locate them, are they on their list, or the topic in question, and especially so if it's a specialized topic that if you were to Google the terms involved, could pop up stuff. Well, that turned out to be quite a mother lode of material on this one. And so we launch off with a paper from 2018, Chung, and it relates to ADAR editing, ADAR, which is a protein that keeps, quote, endogenous RNA from triggering translational shutdown, unquote, and, quote, primarily, unquote, relates to our little pals, the ALUs. So it's in that little section. And there's another paper, Tory 2023, also on their list, on how nuclear RNA controls endogenous retrovirus expressions, and explicitly noting most are getting suppressed. Most of these ERVs are getting suppressed, which is a dead giveaway to the idea that they're not designed to be there to do something. They're an intrusion in the genetic system that a whole compensatory system has evolved to keep them in check. And in the course of that burbling froth, sometimes you get new connections showing up that suddenly take on advantages. As we mentioned previously about how ALUs can link up with another version of itself and crimp the DNA so that it can cut off sections, is the reason why we don't have tails, all that kind of stuff. So a third paper from Sun in 2023 is not, unfortunately, available open access, but I put the abstract up. It's also on ADAR. And then there's a bunch more of the Luskin papers ultimately relate to that. Not, unfortunately, all open access. I'll be putting a link up to kind of the Science Direct Presses, which has abstract and some of the reference notes and some selections of it, but it's not a full text paper. Hogg 2011, but there are a bunch of ones that are. And we'll be starting off with a commentary piece by Mannion, 2015. Oh, good read on Casey is the wiki page discussing his feud with Professor Dave. Oh, yeah, well, so many people have feuds with Professor Dave. He is actually, on a one-to-one basis, is quite personable. But boy, he gets into truculent, take no prisoners mode when he's dealing with Wu. And I put him at the opposite pole from somebody who can eviscerate you, but with gracious sweetness about, and that's Erica Gutsick Gibbon. I think she's a perfect example of somebody who doesn't really take any prisoners, and for that matter, Dan Stern Cardinale, who comes in and talks on the technical level and is always polite in general. I can't always keep my temper. There have been a few occasional creationists where I'm just, buttoned up against this brick wall and I just get flustered about it. So, but then again, my job is not to persuade creationists, it's to detail with the good data. Good read. Yes. Yes, I adore her. Erica is just an absolute gem. She's articulate, she's detailed, she's scrupulously fair. She's one of our go-to people in our network for all the paleoanthropology stuff. And so I'll remind everybody, see, we got a thing with Erica Gutsick-Gibbon is in this, and Dapper Dino, and myself, Jackson Wheat, Dan Stern Cardinale, Zach Hancock, and a whole slew of people circulate around in this thing where we exchange information and discuss scuttlebutt and stuff in our little Twitter conversations. And we're also paying close attention to all these various technical papers. And so somebody will bring up a thing that's in their area of expertise, a geology paper, or someone was just bringing up the paper about the idea that we might have had a ring around the planet during the Ordovician and that there's these impact craters that connect up with it. That inspired Joel Duff, who is also in our network, to do a nice little video explaining how this is also a problem for creationism. And so one thing connects to another. And the advantage of that kind of a network is that it eliminates everybody having to reinvent the wheel on their own, because my God, there are just way too many technical papers and way too many journals and way too many topics that no human being can possibly be having enough time to be able to assess all of them. But if you connect up in a network where people can be bringing up things and you go, oh, that's interesting, and pick it off like a delightful science smorgasbord, it speeds up the process, and so that you can accelerate the ability to deal with information because you don't have to come up with everything cold. So that I can highly recommend as a network approach, and anybody can do that. And Anton has a good one on the rings too. Yeah, it's a delightful paper, and we'll be alluding to it probably in Rocks too. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's including the increasing amount of paleo imagery that you can now see for the result of plate subductions. Some of this relates to Nick Zentner's material on the Pacific Northwest, but there's also new material relating to stuff in the Pacific Ocean, and there's a lot of neat stuff. And so for the geology fans of our project, there's going to be delightful material because we're going to be having a section on basically the paleo world issue of the imagined cartoon that you find in young Earth creationism versus what we know about the actual past. And we got to put stuff on the Grand Canyon in there. That's a big chunk of that material is going to be relating to material in the later part of the book. So we're busy little beavers on it. I'm just completing my little section on Armitage and the Triceratops horn and some newer material on that, and delving into the radiocarbon dating stuff and why doesn't he bring that up? It's kind of like a niche issue. Well, because in fact, it's very possible that the radiocarbon dates they did on that Triceratops horn were accurate, like 35, 40,000 years. If it was a bison lettifrons, that's wouldn't be surprising. They lasted to about 13,000 years ago. So, and in that very region. So anyway, oh yeah, Nick's a good channel, both his and Washington State stuff. Yeah, his is just the world's largest geology course. I think it's an absolute gem of a material. He's meticulous in making papers available open access. So on the website that Nick runs, all that stuff is available directly. So all the topics that they're discussing, everybody can come in and get the material themselves. I've drawn tons of stuff off of that. That long series that he did on the Idaho Pluton is pulling geologists from all over the place, including Siglock from Europe, and that to piece together stuff that's actually super duper cutting edge. He's acting as a catalyst because so many different sub-disciplines weren't paying attention to the data from the other groups. And now, because of this, they're coming together about the idea of what happens to plate subductions that break up and then interact with something else, and they're bumping into the Yellowstone hotspot and the impact that that's having on it, which helps explain why Idaho doesn't have a bunch of Cascade-style volcanic things popping up. It's because of this different dynamic. So this is going to be a window into cutting edge geology work that presumably the students of these various professors will be continuing on. And it's going to be absolutely delightful and exciting. And for all geology people, they can positively geek out on that front. Anyway, back to the show. So we got this 2015 paper from Manion and explains that, quote, the ADAR proteins deaminate adenosine to inosine in double-stranded RNA, which is one of the most abundant modifications present in mammalian RNA. Inosine can have a profound effect on the RNAs that are edited, not only changing the base pairing properties, but can also result in recoding as inosine behaves as if it were guanosine, unquote. And they definitely know how ALUs, which are this thing that's reacting to, disrupt the genetics. So this is immediately dumping into that theodicy issue. Quite a lot of these papers are talking about the potential theodicy angle. So we're still running well over a third of the technical papers that are being brought up on the Luskin list have theodicy implications, which means if they are designed to be there, the designer wants them to do nasty things to us. That's kind of creepy. And certainly Luskin knows enough about this that he's aware of the fact that there is a disease counterpart, but he doesn't care. That somehow or other his brain is reconfigured so that it's got the little designy thing into it. But once again, we are still not finding any indication in any of these papers that they are arguing that most of the ALUs or most of the retrotransposons in general, let alone nearly all of them, are functional. And there's circumstantial evidence in the way they're describing things that indicate that they're not proceeding at that level. So far, out of the well over a couple dozen papers that we've slunged into so far, only one could be provisionally located in that kind of sort of category, because they are phrasing certain things we encountered very early in the series that sounds like it might be open to the idea that lots of them were functional, but that's as far as it goes. It wasn't explicit. From the problem of evil in about every little field. Yeah, it's and it's not merely intelligent design. It would apply to any theocratic approach to, especially people who are prone to gee whiz, wonder, isn't that wonderful and beneficent, and see how clever that little organism is and how beautifully designed it is. A lot of these things have side effects. And it's no coincidence that one of the things that kind of nudged Darwin towards skepticism was the amount of parasitical organisms there were. When the moment you look closer at them, you're going, eeg, sheesh, it's probably better if this is just naturally evolved. Then we don't have to assign any nastiness to it. Anyway, in fact, some of the thing I had, I think in the old chapter 4 of the old book, available at the website, download all of that old tips stuff. Where I brought up the Titanic iceberg analogy and all of that. I think it was in chapter 4 on intelligent design, the creationism light chapter. Anyway, back to our points. So that theodicy matter applies to a whole pile up of the material that pop up on their list. They got 2 papers from Nishikura from 2006 and 2016. There's a 2017 paper from Sakurai. There's a 2017 paper from Yang, a 2018 paper from Shevchenko. And the disease aspect is literally right up front in the abstract of the paper. And then I'm putting up a draft link to Roth 2019. The full paper isn't officially open access, but the draft should give you a pretty good idea of it. And then there's a 2020 paper from Shiramoto. So we're certainly not talking about a shortage of available material that they're dropping onto us. And so we're able to measure all of this, and they're certainly paying attention. Most of their citations are relatively recent papers in the 2020s. So clearly they're just scavenging through stuff, or as we noted in the previous week, where or the previous installment of this, where a bunch of papers were mentioned in a paragraph in one of the ones that showed up on the Luskin list. And they clearly went through and added in almost all of those papers onto their list, but not the ones that relate to diseases overtly, although a few have slipped in anyway. So it's a fascinating little process to follow along on this front. When we get into the returning to our dinosaur topic, one of the things that I'll be paying attention to is how they're dealing with that whole crest and dentition issue, which relates to breaking down things in terms of the relationships of animals within them, and just how broadly are they wanting to treat the bloody hadrosaur kind, because there's just so many different crest forms. How is it possible for them to have been generated from an initial created kind, and which ones were on the ark? This is an area where I'm not expecting them to ever think this one through. Dentition is also very interesting because iguanodons, and especially hadrosaurs, well, for that matter, so did ceratopsians, have like conveyor belt teeth systems and the like. They were now living in the Cretaceous, and they had a different dietary system to deal with. So unlike your old big sauropods that just basically are raking the little fronds off of conifers, you now have to have things that are chewing plants that are defensively generating the consistency of celery. And so they have to have more grinding batteries and fascinating structures in the same way that you find with mastodons and all the rest, with the complex grinding patterns and that they deal with their molars that become so distinctive that they can tell one species from another just from the tooth structures. Mammalian teeth are just ridiculously diagnostic, and many species are in fact only known by the teeth because they're small critters and they don't have full bodies available in the fossil record, and we would want to ask why that is so, et cetera, and so forth and so on. So here we go. Let me put up my thank you note to our dear patrons. Let me see here, get my little share screen again. I could not do this without you, gang. Just as Dapper Dino points out, don't worry about trying to help the project if you can't afford it. But if you got a little bit to spare, it can be like $1 a month. Everything adds up. That if you can do that on a regular basis in particular, I doff my hat and thank you all our colleagues and researchers, assistant researchers, friends, and our legacy patrons. We will keep at it as long as we can. So then, Jack's now currently going through the other half of what had started out as the Flood Legends material chapter, which is the part that also has all that stuff on soft tissue. And that is actually becoming 2 chapters in the book. Once I finish the Armitage material, then that'll dust that little bit off, although I'll be continuing to stick in material because there's incoming ICR, Acts and Facts issues, and new material that pops up that, where warranted, I'm sticking them into the field so that it will be as up to date as possible. This will be a delightful research area. My next little thing will be the cosmology chapter, where we go into the Big Bang and planetary and stellar formations and the whole stuff about thermodynamics, and sidebars that's going to include the Oklo paleonuclear reactor and the wacky stuff that Kent Hovind has on his little end, and the polonium halos from Gentry and all that. And this will also be kind of a systematic as to what issues pop up squeaky wheel as who and how many players there are. Cosmology has very few players, and it gets remarkable short shrift in many respects. The 2 of the Answers books both put only a single chapter up on cosmology matters, and thinly documented at that. The one in the more recent book is by Jason Lyle. So you got Lyle and a handful of other people who are operating in that cosmology frame. And we'll also be bringing in some of the old Earth creationist material. For all practical purposes, the intelligent design movement just doesn't affect this. They don't think about it. And so getting back to the question earlier in the live chat, that they have a much more truncated data field that they're dealing with. Young Earth creationism stomps on practically everything: history, geology, paleontology, the whole bloom, bloom, bloom. So, and also philosophy and ethics, and a whole bunch of other stuff, because there's a level of applied Budinskyism to that worldview that is just much more aggressive and insatiable. It's just a rando paper on trilobites. Yeah, the trilobites are just fascinating stuff. And the interesting bit about it is that when you start out with trilobites, they are not as highly specialized as they are later, and they have such a long spread from the Cambrian down to I seem to think they kicked out in the Permian, along with a few other forms. But to have that major level of life, they don't start out looking as intricate. There's clearly adaptational trends. Somebody who, one of the founders of Punctuated Equilibrium, Eldritch, has made a big deal about the enormous amount of change, and Forty and others who have written on the topics. Now, the earliest trilobites, well, now we're going into the issue of what little organism is going to be looking like if its earliest forms don't have a shell. And why are they having a shell that they molt? Well, partly because they need protection from predators. So all of that goes back to that predator-prey relationship thing. I can't remember which chapter I stuck it in. It may have been in that creationism light chapter, but I know I had stuff in the old tip work on the schizochroil eyes of trilobites and how creationists have misrepresented that material. Most of the stuff being brought up in the young earth creationist frame, and Dwayne Gish had shot his mouth off on it. And so anyway, I refer you back to all of that material, and some of that stuff gets alluded to in the more recent books. But anyway, yes, this account is no wrench here. Yes, well, you should have. Let me see if I can give you one, dear boy. That's it. Nope, I'm trying to see. Why am I not getting a, yes. I don't see a menu thing. Wait a minute, what have we got here? No, that's a pin thing. Unpin. But I don't see a blurb here, so there's nothing that suggests that there's a wrench menu in this platform that I got. It's unlike YouTube. So sorry, Brian, I can't give you a wrench because I guess there's no wrenches in this little bit here. So anyway, okie doke. So we've got a good half-hour show in, after which, when the thing finalizes, we will definitely be putting the links up on here. I'm looking forward to the Tuesday debate between Waltz and Vance. It's going to be interesting. I'm crossing fingers and hoping that Waltz positively pulverizes him. There's so many fascinating little issues to deal with. It would be nice if reporters would be asking source methods questions. That would be absolutely fascinating. Trump in particular is prone to extremely categorical statements that he's constantly referring vaguely to people tell him, and I've heard, and I'm told, or the one that he loves, everybody knows things, everybody knows, agrees with me, everybody. So he has announced that ways back that all legal scholars agree that Roe v. Wade needed to be put back to the states. No. And so it would be fascinating to ask for Trump to supply that list, because this is a categorical. He says all of them. Well, let's see that little list of all. And it would be hilarious to ask him, can you even remember any legal scholars? He might maybe remember Torley, because he's popped up in some of the Trumpista defenses that have occurred. But that would be a rather fascinating question to ask. And I think anybody, knowing, having seen how Waltz can shop talk details on scientific imagery when he had a lecture before he became the vice presidential candidate, I was impressed by his meticulous style. And I don't know that Mini-Me Vance is going to be able to get to that level. So depending on the questions asked, and depending upon, he's not as temperamental in terms of goading, but he's still got very sloppy method. And the issue of how he can be maybe baited to be intemperate or have to defend some of these things. Clearly, the Haitian thing is a mess. A fascinating little datum that I discovered. There's some indications that Florida may be in play. Remember, Obama took Florida in 2008 and 2012, and Trump only won the state in 2020 by 380,000 votes. So given an invigorated campaign and young people coming online and women and people of color and retirees and all kind of getting queasy about Trump, another datum that entered the picture is, guess how many Haitians live in Florida? 500,000. And do you think Haitians are going to be excessively enthused over the Vance Trump ticket, given the absolutely nasty things that they've been saying and this vacuous flapdoodle? So it would be hilariously ironic if it ends up that Trump loses Florida, in part because of him swallowing Vance's stupid pet-eating Haitian absurdity. Um, yeah. Yeah, we all sometimes have to bounce into our little worlds of how we handle the information online. And I always kind of tweak myself to go, it's amazing what we can do. I mean, we can interact with people all over the world. We can download information at no cost. Thank you very much. That from a scholar's point of view, it's just, I'm like a kid in a candy store. And as this show hopefully demonstrates, wow, is there a pile of stuff that's open access? And I'd like to be able to wean people as much as possible off of general secondary accounts, which some people tend to focus on in some of their operation, to get up the ratchet to deal with technical literature and offer it so you can explain the context of it and say, if you want to follow up, follow it up. And people can gradually become more and more familiar with that deep end of stuff. I think this is a thing where having people on who are expert in the areas, like Flint Dibble had a wonderful material interview with one of the excavators at Göbekli Tepe to explain why the Graham Hancock view of things is flapdoodle, and also opening up why the real archaeologists are doing fabulous and interesting work. So anyway, yeah, Miami is little Asia. Yes, yes. Comedy Central did a just hilarious thing about the GOP scientists who were trying to figure out where the Haitians come from, whereas Mr. Trump thinks they come from Venezuela because that's where he wants to send them to, whereas others, putting up J.D. Vance, declares that they come from Haiti. And Vance is a Yale graduate. Maybe he needs to ask for his money back. So he just live in Florida, Americans still. Well, I imagine that an awful lot of them have been here long enough that they have taken up citizenship, and therefore we're perfectly capable of voting. So it's going to be an interesting thing. Or the people the Haitians know will know directly about this, and this will be part of that cultural frame that's saying, yikes, this Trump guy's a nasty little nutball, and is bad for just about everybody. So let me put up our advert for The Rocks Were There. Waiting for our thing to load. Okay. And then to our happy little world, of green share. Voila. Jackson and I are very proud of Volume 1, and we think Volume 2 will be even more fun. Plus, it will have 4 years more of science data in there, and 4 years more of creationist stupidity, because they don't seem to slow down in repeating dumb or coming up with new dumb. And the implications of things, there will be some little sidebar allusions to some of the political circumstances that we have, both in the Americas and elsewhere. I think some of the problems that you see with Modi and Hindu nationalism are comparable to the kinds of stuff that we see in the scientific illiterates among the Trumpistas. One bad method to rule them all, as I would be saying. So there we go. That work and evolution slam dunk. are all available, and we put links up in the show every single week, as well as links to the rocks or to Paralogs of Phileas Fogg as you get into autumn. And remember, holiday gift giving, Christmas gifts and the like, at your science fiction, mystery, adventure readers. There's a lot of stuff going on in Fog. Great humor and historical adventures and time machines and atomic powered flying machines and all sorts of fun stuff. And the other novels are going to be exploring more fun material. I have fun writing them, and I think those who do dive into the books find it entertaining. So that's something to get for your reader friends at any point. And also, anybody that's really profligate can buy the books and donate them to your local public library. And so other people can read them in that context. So anyway, shameless plug time. Okay, so everybody stay, if you're in the flood zone from the current hurricane and some of the other areas with fires down in the Californians and that, we're kind of in a lull in the Pacific Northwest for a while. There was some stuff down in Oregon and that was kind of severe, but it's kind of mellowed. We're in little bit last gasp of summer. To show how climate has shifted within my lifetime, my rose bushes, which used to hit in the May-June period, they're blooming still way into current. So there's fresh bloom still on the rose bushes in the front yard in late September. That's changing the dynamics of stuff. So anyway, yes, time machines are my favorite machines. Yes. Well, spoiler alert, Phileas Fogg in my storyline is the time traveler from H.G. Wells. And the time travel episodes that occur, eventually he's going to be building his flying time machine that's going to be figured into later novels and that. So I have all this thing worked out as a big epic that there will be all told a dozen paralogue stories. And I'm currently working on number 3, Jewels to the Flame, which is filling in the backstory of what was going on in the second novel with the dangerous Helios airship and its deadly plasma ray, I suppose you would have to call it, and now we're figuring out what's going on with the mechanics of all of that. And it's a funky. I have a delightful time coming up with material and exploring the research that. So when you get, just like in the second novel, you have a tour. They're visiting the Centennial Exhibition in Philadelphia. There's going to be the 1878 Paris Exposition in the third novel, where the head of the Statue of Liberty was on display, whereas the torch was on display at the Centennial Exhibition. And then future novels, there'll be the 89 Exposition in Paris with the Eiffel Tower and the Chicago World's Fair with the Ferris wheel and all that stuff. So I can't miss a delightful World's Fair. Figure out what I can do for suspense adventure. That's the Hitchcock mode. Hitchcock would never pass up a public event or a national monument to have a thriller suspense story take place in. So anyway, everybody stay safe, guard yourself against wooden penguins, and we will be catching you all next week.